All right, so hey guys, welcome back to another video. You guys are all doing well. Today we're going to be taking a look at the used graphics card market, since it's getting to be really good now that graphics cards are really dying in terms of prices. We have a huge problem with oversupply. All these miners are trying to kind of get rid of it because it's pretty much the end of graphics card mining for the foreseeable future. And we've got an entirely new generation of graphics cards that are supposed to be coming out here either later this year or very early next year. So today I want to kind of go over some deals or just some graphics cards you guys should really just be keeping an eye on if you are looking at either doing an upgrade on your current rig or just building an entirely new one and aren't completely closed off from the idea of getting a used graphics card. Now, I do want to assess that one of the main things that people really are apprehensive about when buying a used card is that there are all these bad things or horror stories that you guys hear from people who have had bad experiences from buying cards from miners. And I think a lot of these apprehensions against mining cards are a little bit unfounded, mostly because people who are mining on a large scale tend to take care of their cards a lot. And that's kind of the main thing that is going to cause degradation in your graphics card, is just neglecting it, not cleaning it out, letting it run at super high temperatures, and not doing sort of the necessary maintenance that you need to do to keep a part fully functioning. Now, because miners are paying for these things, it's pretty much an investment. They will clean these things. They make sure to underclock them to make sure that they don't run at crazy high voltages, because they are paying for all the power that they're taking in. So usually these things aren't going to be getting crazy hot. Mainly the only downside to buying a mining graphics card is that the video memory most likely has been clocked up pretty high than the stock settings. Is mostly just going to result in you being not able to overclock the video memory maybe as high as it could have been when that graphics card was first put onto a system. Now again, one of the nice things is that we are going to be looking at graphics cards from eBay, and if you do get a card that is DOA or just doesn't work out of the box, you can send it back, because if it doesn't specify that it is a broken card in the description or anywhere in the title of the listing, that would go against eBay's terms of service and you would be entitled to a full refund for your graphics card. So with all of that being said, let's kind of get into it. So the first card I really want to take a look at is going to be the RX 580. Now the RX 580 was actually my first graphics card that I ever bought for one of my gaming PCs back a long time ago, whenever the 580 first came out. I can't really remember. But when that card first came out, that was one of the cards that I ended up getting, and it was one of my favorite graphics cards. I actually had it up until my recent graphics card upgrade that I got about 2 years ago, and that thing ran like a champ. And I think especially at the price point that a lot of these used cards are coming in at, it's a really good deal. I mean, this is around a $110, $120 card that you guys can find on eBay. And if you go on sites like OfferUp and Facebook Marketplace and buy it directly from them, it's probably going to be closer to $100 to $90 if you can find people who are looking to just get rid of these graphics cards. And in terms of performance, this is just going to be an absolute 1080p monster. Now, it's not going to have all of those great features that many people might be accustomed to on some newer graphics cards, like things like ray tracing, any sort of upsampling technology, and stuff like that. It's not going to be the best for video editing or any of that sort of stuff. It's just a really good gaming card, and I honestly think at this price point you're going to be getting exactly what you want. It's any game that you really want to play, whether that be Warzone, Fortnite, or any sort of cinematic game. If you're just playing at 1080p medium to high settings, you're going to be hitting around 60 FPS on pretty much every game you're going to be playing. And so for someone who's looking for a cheap like $500 to $600 build, I think that this is one of the go-to graphics cards that a lot of people should be looking at on their new systems. Now the next card is kind of the brother to the RX 580, and that's going to be the RX 5500 XT. Now this is another AMD graphics card. This one I don't necessarily think I'd recommend it a whole lot, just because there is so many more RX 580s on the market, and that's going to cause a huge decrease in price compared to the RX 5500 XT. Now the 5500 XT is going to perform slightly better than the RX 580 in some titles. It is a fairly newer card, but it is going to be a fair bit more expensive just because it is a newer card. I wouldn't really honestly recommend getting this card over the RX 580, but if you are looking for something a little bit newer, something that most likely has not been mined on, I think the RX 5500 XT is kind of the alternative that you can go for within this price segment. And the GTX 1070 is one of my favorite graphics cards to ever release. It was kind of the card that I really wanted to get when I was looking for my first graphics card. I just didn't have in my budget to grab one of these when they were kind of first coming out. So I did have to settle with an RX 580, but the GTX 1070 is still an absolute monster. For those of you guys who kind of want to know realistically how it's going to be performing, it's going to be around a GTX 1660 Super or a GTX 1660 Ti. It's going to perform up or down and depending in different games and how much VRAM they end up using, because this card does have 2 more gigabytes of VRAM compared to those 16 series cards. And in terms of pricing, again, it is fairly cheap. This thing's sitting around the $150 to $170 price range. If you can find it for below $150, I think this is going to be an absolute deal. Again, it performs extremely well. If you're looking for an NVIDIA card that has mostly the new features, again, it's not going to have DLSS or ray tracing, but if you are someone who is kind of into CUDA, if you want that NVENC encoder for media production, I think that this card is going to be a great budget option for a lot of people. Now, the RTX 2060 has kind of been one that I've been recommending to a lot of people within my Discord or just people that I talk to, if you are looking at getting a used graphics card, just because of how many of these were in circulation and how long NVIDIA was still making these. Again, there's just a ton of these out there, and for the most part, this card still performs extremely well. This 2060 actually isn't that far off from a modern day 3060, and really the main downsides between this card and the 3060 is just much less VRAM, which you don't really need the 12 gigabytes that the 3060 has for 1080p gaming, and the fact that its ray tracing just isn't nearly as good as what the 3060 has in it. But if you can get by those 2 things, it still has DLSS and all those things that you would want from NVIDIA Tensor Cores, which is things like NVIDIA Broadcast, which is what I use for a lot of my stuff, just because it makes it really easy for you to stream and make high quality content with just, you know, an NVIDIA graphics card. And in terms of pricing, these things are going for right around $200, and I think that this is a really good price point, especially again if people are looking to get a $600 to $700 build. You want to get a pretty nice CPU, nice case, board, and if you're going for used parts for all those other things as well, you can get a pretty decent system off this used market, considering how cheap some of these NVIDIA 2060s are going for. Now, one thing I would like to mention, the 2060 wasn't really that big of a mining card. Now, you will probably find some 2060s that were used for mining, but it's not very common. And again, really, the 20 series isn't that great for mining. It's mainly those 30 series graphics cards that are out now. So again, you really don't have to worry about that. These are just pretty much just in gaming systems, and for the most part, most of these cards come in really good condition. So for again, people who are just looking at getting any sort of budget graphics card right now, maybe you're waiting for the next generation to come out and you still want to play some good games, and you still want to play some games with, you know, some of those new features, I think the 2060 is going to be a really good buy for a lot of people. Now, the RX 5700 XT was never really that great of a card when it first came out. It had a lot of driver issues, a lot of problems, but it was a fairly decent mining card. And again, that's kind of a good thing when we are looking at the graphics card market, because it does kind of correlate to a huge drop in prices. Once people are selling off all their mining stuff, it's gonna be a direct correlation to the pricing of those parts on the used market. And so as we're seeing here, around $250 for an amazing 1440p graphics card is a really good deal. And again, mining on these cards isn't going to destroy them. It actually doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be any performance degradation at all in these cards. It just depends on how well that they were kept up. So if you guys are just looking at photos of these cards, just make sure to look at the condition, make sure that they're clean, make sure to look that there's not a ton of dust in them. And again, if they look fairly good, I think that these are really good items to go out and buy. Like I did mention, the RX 5700 XT didn't have the best drivers when it first came out, but it has been about 3 to 4 years since their initial launch, and the driver situation for AMD in general has gotten so much better, and therefore for the 5700 XT, the drivers are extremely stable. So you don't really need to worry about that there. Again, AMD, I still think, offers some of the best gaming graphics cards. If you are looking for something to do some sort of media production or just other stuff, then I probably would go for the NVIDIA camp. But if you're just looking for strictly for gaming, I think the RX 5700 XT and a lot of these other AMD cards are really good cards to go for. All right, so let's take a look at the RTX 30 series. So the RTX 3090 is kind of the first one I look at. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this one to a whole lot of people just because things like the 3080 and 3080 Ti come fairly close to the 3090 in terms of performance, and you can get them for significantly cheaper. But the 3090 was actually more used in mining than I thought it would be. The 3080 was technically the most efficient card for GPU mining, so therefore you would think that it would have the highest price drop in terms of, you know, the MSRP to used. But really, the 3090 has dropped a ton in pricing. As you guys can see here, there's some models going for around $800 to $900. I think I saw a couple go for around $750, and I do think that these cards are going to keep on crashing as we get closer to the release of the next generation of graphics cards, and as mining just keeps on ramping down as time goes on. Now, I would be a little bit wary about the 3090, especially if it is used in mining. So it's not necessarily because of mining itself is bad, but more of just because of the engineering behind the 3090. So for those of you guys who don't know, the 3090 has kind of a two-way configuration that they put on their video memory. They put it on the front and the back of the card. It was fairly easy to cool the memory at the front part of the card where the die is and stuff like that. That's where all the cooling of the card ends up going. Well, on the back side, there's really nothing there. You're just kind of relying on convection of airflow through the case to cool that video memory, which didn't really work because this video memory hogged a ton of power. And the video memory got very, very hot, which is not great for video memory. And I have had a lot of people talk to me and say that, yeah, their 3090s end up dying after a while just because of how hot that video memory gets, and it ends up breaking the card. So I would be a little bit more wary about 3090s, but things like 3080s and 3070s, which I'm going to be taking a look at here in just a second, are going to be, I think, pretty decent cards to go after. All right, so as I was looking at 3080s, I was looking at some 3070 models and realized how much better 3070s have actually gone in terms of their sale prices. This Zotac one here sold for $431. Again, so some of these are going for a little bit more money than I honestly think that they should. I don't think you should be paying anywhere close to $500 to $600 for these cards, but that $430 mark, that $400 mark, and anything below that, I think is going to be a really good buy when you're looking at an RTX 3070. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you to wait or pull the trigger right away on a graphics card, just because I don't know what pricing is going to do here in the future. But I will assume that, again, pricing is still going to go down on these cards as the new generation's coming out and as all these mining cards are starting to kind of come on the market. So again, if you are looking for a 3070, I'd kind of be looking for around that 450 and below range. If you're willing to spend more, then you can go for a 3080, but from what I was seeing, they're still going for fairly expensive prices. They're going for around that $650 to $700 price point, which I still don't necessarily think is the best buy right now. But when it comes to the 30 series, I think the 3060 Ti, the 3070, and maybe the 3060 are going to be pretty decent options to go with. Now, the RX 6800 is the current card that I have in my gaming machine, and it is one of my favorite cards I've ever owned. This thing does perform a good bit better than the RTX 3070. I think that this is a really good card to go for considering how much they're going for. This one sold for $430. This one sold for $450. Like, we have one selling for very, very cheap considering the level of performance that you are getting from them. Now, when it comes to just places to shop, I definitely think that any place that you can go to is fine, as long as it's somewhat reputable. Craigslist isn't the best, but two of my favorite, again, are OfferUp and Facebook Marketplace. When it comes to comparing those two to eBay, you aren't going to get necessarily as much buyer's protection as you would from eBay. eBay does hold funds and make sure that the person who bought the product gets the one that they paid for, and not something else. eBay will make sure that that person does end up getting a refund. With OfferUp and Facebook Marketplace, you pretty much kind of have to put your trust in the people who are on there. Kind of have to read people at the meeting spots, kind of see if the card was taken care of, make sure that it works, because again, there's really no buyer protection there. But the upside with that is that you should be getting a lot better prices on there. So from the prices that we've been seeing here on eBay and stuff like that, like, you should probably be seeing around like a $20 to $30 discount on those sites compared to what you're seeing on eBay. So if you really want to go for really budget stuff and you still want to get really good performance out of it, those are going to be the places to go. But for people who are just kind of getting into the used market, maybe who don't necessarily know what to go for, are still kind of hesitant about trusting people with their used stuff, eBay is probably going to be the way to go. Now, there are going to be a ton of other good graphics cards to look at on the used market. These are just ones that I found myself that I thought were pretty decent deals considering the cards and their price points. But with that being said, if you guys have any questions about, practices of how to go out and buy these cards, what you should be looking at, what kind of price ranges you should be looking at for these cards, make sure to leave this down in the comment section below. I'll love to answer your guys' questions. And we also have a Discord channel where you guys can go talk to some people who are really enthusiastic about tech and getting good deals, and they should be able to help you there as well. Now, if you guys found this video helpful, make sure to leave a like on it. It really helps me out. If you guys want to see more content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.